All right, we're off and rolling. Medalist here, round two. This is the second episode, and this one just sort of happened today. I was like going through some of my CDs, and I'm like, okay, here's 5 records that I think everybody should own. You know, particularly if you like hard rock and heavy metal. Okay, some are kind of mainstream, some kind of obscure, but you know, little sampling. You know, I just grab some. They're in alphabetical order of the ones I picked out. They're not in any particular order, like this album's better than that one, that kind of thing. You can debate that in the chat if you'd like, on the comments, I mean. So let's get it started here. I was just kind of in the middle of the alphabet when I just started like going through some discs here. First one. Love this record. This is, trying to get rid of the glare. There we go. King's X. This is a really good band, primarily from Texas, although I did run into a guy who claimed to have gone to school with Doug Pinnick at a school in Missouri. So maybe he went to college in Missouri. That's an unconfirmed rumor. But anyway, power trio. So we got Doug Pinnick on vocals. We got Ty Tabor on guitar and also vocals, and Jerry Gaskill on drums. And guess what? Vocals. So all 3 of these guys can sing. Doug is a left-handed 12-string bass player. You don't get many of those off the rack, I don't imagine. But 12-string bass has a very cool sound. And prior to that, the only guy I ever heard that sang, or not sang, that played a 12-string bass was from Cheap Trick. That would be Tom Peterson. So, but anyway. So if you're not familiar with King's X, all the records are really good. This one in particular, I really like. It's a little heavier than some of their other stuff. So to describe their sound, I would say picture having like the heavy guitars of Black Sabbath, having a little bit of a funk and a groove like Jimi Hendrix, and Beatle-like harmonies for the vocals. That's King's X. So if that sounds pretty tasty to you, you might want to pick up this record. The cover actually comes in 4 different colors, so the dog comes in 4 different colors in addition to blue. I think I actually had a couple other ones at one time, but I don't know. But here you can see that here's the yellow one on the actual disc. And then I think there was red and maybe green, I think is what it was. But so there's different versions of that one. So that's the first one I was thinking about. This one here, huge fan of these guys. Been for a very, very long time. This one's a little hard to see the cover because it's got autographs all over it. This is a band from Louisiana called Lillian Axe. Again, trying to get rid of the freaking glare here. That's about as good as it's going to get, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, so Lillian Axe, like I said, these guys started off, they were kind of looked upon as a hair metal band, but they really weren't. They were a lot more than that. But I mean, they had the look. I mean, they came out in '89, so that was like it might have been '88. Anyway, they came out towards the end of the '80s, so that was kind of when the hair metal thing was still kind of in full swing, but starting to dwindle a little bit. The first album was produced by Rats Robin Crosby, which of course is going to give you that vibe as well, in terms of you know, thinking, oh yeah, this is just a hair metal band. But they're a lot more than that. The constant member of this band was Steve Blaze, or Stevie Blaze, as he's sometimes called. Anyway, Blaze is an amazing guitar player. Actually, probably one of my top 10 all-time guitar players. The guy is phenomenal. Okay, and this is one of my favorite studio albums by them. This is called Psychoschizophrenia. Say that 5 times fast, right? This was the last album they did for a while. Then they kind of went on a hiatus from about 1994, and then they came back around 2002. Did a live album in 2002. I'd recommend that one very highly as well. It's a very nice representation of their music, and you know, it's just a great set. Really enjoyed it. Did get to see that particular show in Cleveland when it happened. So again, this is one of my favorite studio albums by them. They took a break, then they came back. Different vocalists, a lot of different people in the lineup, but the quality has always been good. And interestingly enough, the original singer, Ron Taylor, actually he's not the original singer, but he's the original singer on album. Ron Taylor, everybody they've had since then sounds like Ron Taylor, so it still sounds like Lillian Axe. But yeah, some killer stuff here, so go check these guys out. And here's a picture of the band. They weren't quite so hair metal at this point, but they were starting to get out of that a little bit. Matter of fact, I think on this particular album, the drummer, he went by Tommy Scott, I think, at the time, but he ended up being the drummer for quite a few years in Godsmack. if you're a little more into that sort of 90s kind of sound of hard rock and metal. But yeah, good stuff right here. All right, so this was one of my records from my formative years, shall we say. And honestly, I never get tired of this record. Top 10 all time for me. And that would be the Mighty Montrose. Love this record. Okay. So Ronnie Montrose actually, and Bill Church, the bass player, actually started off, and they worked with Van Morrison, who's a very cool cat. And my wife is a huge fan of Van Morrison, actually. And so Ronnie was a pretty massive guitar player. So he formed his own band. And it's kind of hard to see him, but this guy up here in the corner, right there, okay, he was a guy that was called Sam Hagar. You might be familiar with him. So interesting enough, this album came out in like 1973, I believe, maybe 74, but I think 73. And my only criticism of it is it's too short. It's 8 songs, clocks in a little bit over half an hour, and just all killer, no filler. Just amazing, amazing stuff. Just good, hard rocking. There's no fancy frills, just great guitar tones. Sammy sounds awesome. And interestingly enough, some of the deluxe versions of this, which I haven't picked up, but I do have the bootleg of it, they contain a radio broadcast that was done by the band before they actually even had a name. And it would I find it interesting. It was K-San out in San Francisco. And these guys didn't have an album deal. They didn't even have a record. They didn't even have a name. They put them on the air. That's how new they were. They put these guys on the air live for an hour to play live. I'm just amazed because that certainly will never happen in this day and age. But yeah, a very cool thing. So they actually, broadcast that on the radio, and there is a deluxe version of this where you can get that radio broadcast, and it's pretty massive as well. The interesting thing about this album was this was really kind of the blueprint for the first Van Halen album. And coincidentally, the reason for that is the producer is a guy named Ted Templeman, who also produced the first Van Halen album. But of course, the Van Halen album didn't come along for another 4 or 5 years after that. But again, like I said, if you're into Van Halen, you like that sound of that very first album, you're going to love Montrose. Now, you're not as fancy of pyrotechnics on the guitar. Ronnie was pretty much a meat and potatoes kind of guy, but great sounding stuff. So I could talk about this album. I could probably do a whole show just on this album, but I'll stop for now. So again, there's the boys on the back. So you see Sammy over there with all the curly hair. And of course, it's interesting enough that, this seemed to spawn the first Van Halen album, which of course Sammy showed up in Van Halen later. And if you have your opinion on that one way or the other, that's great. But I'll leave mine for now. There you go. All right, next up. So this one kind of has a connection to the shirt here, the Halloween shirt I'm wearing here. This is the, so you can see it there, 30th anniversary. When Halloween comes to the United States, they do about half a dozen shows. It's not much. So when they made it to Columbus, 2 hours away from where we were at, it's like, yep, get in the car. We're on our way. And this was before, this particular shirt was before they did the United tour, where they brought back Kai Hansen and Michael Kiske and just had the whole troop of guys up there, which is really great and would love to see that. Was actually considering going to Vegas to actually see that, because of course they came around and they only did 6 or 7 shows. Seems how they do it in America. So anyway, the connection here is with these guys, and this is one of the worst names of a band I've ever seen, but one of the best bands I've ever heard. They're called Pink Cream 69. Yeah, I think it's silly too. Anyway, these guys, they started off with a singer named Andy Darris. Andy Darris left in 1994 to join a band called Helloween. Yes. So then they picked up a guy named David Redman. And then Redman, they did a couple albums with him. They had one called Food for Thought, one called Change. And they hadn't quite figured out what they wanted to be. This is what they wanted to be. Yeah. Sonic Dynamite, this one's called. So the albums around this era, Sonic Dynamite, there's Endangered, a couple other ones. I mean, just amazing stuff. And the interesting thing about Pink Cream, or PC69 as a lot of people call them, is that this isn't a band that you're going to sit there and go, man, that guitar player is amazing, or that bass player is awesome, the drummer's great, or the singer's awesome. It's not like that. They're a unit. They are definitely a unit. But I mean, the songs are so catchy, so memorable. I mean, the hooks and the choruses, you'll be humming them for days. Okay, this is great stuff. So I would recommend starting with Sonic Dynamite if you're not familiar with these guys. And again, like I said, they did do albums with Andy Darris. I like those. I don't like them as well as the David Redman stuff. And like I said, Andy was a good replacement in Helloween. I mean, we were all kind of upset when Michael Kiske left, but he came in and did an admirable job. His first album with Helloween is called Lord of the Rings, and again, I think it was from '94, and that's worth checking out too. No, Master of the Rings. My bad. Master of the Rings. Okay, but yeah, PC69. Check him out. Awesome. All right, last one for the day. This is another one of my top 10 all time. And these guys, their name's okay, their covers, not so much. They liked Seals. I don't get it either. But Riot is an amazing freaking band. Oh, love these guys so much, especially from 77 to 83. So this is with original singer Guy Speranza. And this was the last album they did with Guy. And then they brought in a guy named Rhett Forrester. And Rhett Forrester was like a complete 180 from Guy. Guy was kind of like literally a great name for him, Guy. He was one of the guys. He was just a guy up there singing, okay? Then they brought in this guy, Rhett Forrester, and this guy was just a freaking rock star, okay? He looked like a cross between Dave Mustaine and David Coverdale. So he was a cross of two Daves. But like I said, those albums are amazing too, but this was the album that really did it for me. I mean, I like the previous albums. I liked, Rock City and Narita. But when they got to this one, this is the stuff. There's a tune on here called Swords and Tequila. Check that song out. The opening riff, you're going to be going, wait a minute. Isn't this 2 Minutes to Midnight? No, it's not, because this was 5 years before 2 Minutes to Midnight. So I don't know. Somebody from the Maiden camp might have been listening to this. But this was a band that, despite not being part of the new wave of British heavy metal in the early 80s, they were part of the first Monsters of Rock Monsters of Rock Castle Donington shows. Okay, and that was one that had Rainbow, Scorpions, Saxon, Riot was there, and yeah, just amazing. So yeah, this record was for the longest time something I could not find on CD, and when I finally did, I was like, oh, so good. But I mean, I had to get one out of Germany. This came from Germany. Whether they've ever released it here in the States, I'm not really sure. But yeah, I mean, it used to be, I had a record player just so I could play the album. And it was kind of interesting because when you hadn't played an album in a while and you do play an album, it's like, wow, the bottom end really sounds better on vinyl. It really does. If you don't mind a little snap, crackle, pop, Rice Krispies kind of thing, right? Okay. So yeah, this one, definitely. Now, Riot went on after Rhett Forrester. They had some different vocalists, and Mark Reale, the guitar player, was the original guy. Mark finally passed away. Complications to Crohn's disease, I believe I heard. And the band continues on as Riot 5, kind of as a tribute to him. And that stuff's pretty good too, but after these albums, they kind of went the thrash metal vibe for a while with an album called Thundersteel. Good stuff, but like I said, this is the stuff I really like. And soon after that, I kind of lost track of them. I mean, I was aware of some of the records, but this is the stuff I'm going to reach for every time. So there you go. There's 5 records that I would highly recommend you check out. And I appreciate you checking out the channel. Again, hit that subscribe button. Would love you if you do that. I'm thinking probably next time I go into the room with these CDs, I'm probably going to go, here's another 5. So I imagine there's going to be a sequel to this thing. So hopefully you guys will be there to check it out. And we'll see you next time.